What's up, everybody? My name is Demetri Kofinas. I'm a media entrepreneur, financial analyst, and the host of Hidden Forces, a podcast that helps investors, entrepreneurs, and everyday citizens get an edge by equipping themselves with the knowledge needed to anticipate the challenges and opportunities of tomorrow. By sharing my critical thinking approach and by challenging consensus narratives about the power structures shaping our world, I help you make the connections to see the bigger picture, empowering you to make smarter decisions. On this week's episode, I speak with world-renowned trainer, author, and CEO of Attack Athletics, Tim Grover. Tim has personally trained and worked with some of the most elite, iconic athletes in the world, including Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwyane Wade, and hundreds of other sports and business professionals. He is the preeminent authority on the science and art of physical and mental dominance, and his latest book, Winning: The Unforgiving Race to Greatness, is a testament to that lifelong dedication. This is not a conversation that's going to give you a roadmap to victory, not even close. In fact, I don't know if I would even describe it as motivational. I think for some people, this conversation will be incredibly validating. For others, unnerving. Because winning doesn't apologize. As Tim would say, it doesn't explain. In the language of winning, there is no talk about motivation. So if you're already addicted to the taste of success, if you've been chasing it for as long as you can remember, if you've caught it and want it again, then this conversation will speak to you. In this episode, you're going to learn about some of the tools and techniques that Tim and his athletes and high achievers have used to execute and compete at the highest level of human performance. You're going to learn about how to harness your dark side, about how not to care about what others think, about letting go of entitlement, clearing your mind, and learning to focus on the details and on what matters most to you. As Tim will say, winning is not a marathon, it's a sprint with no finish line. There is no balance. In order to win anything, you have to live your life with urgency at every moment, because winning wants all of you. There's never enough time, so why waste any of it? For those of you who are basketball fans, I get to ask Tim about his experience working with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant during the pinnacles of their basketball careers, about what they were like as individuals, and about what it was like for him to play a part in their success. There's absolutely nothing typical about today's conversation, and it was an incredible privilege for me to take part in it. So without any further ado, please enjoy this week's episode with my guest, Tim Grover. Tim Grover, welcome to Hidden Forces.
It's an honor.
No, man. The honor is all mine, Tim. You've written a phenomenal book. You
know what I always say? Listen, everyone says, it's an honor to have me as a guest. I look at it the other way, that you have so many other people you could have chosen to speak to interview, to be part of this podcast, and you chose me. So it is an honor. Thank you.
Listen, look, your book, and we're going to talk about the book. Your book was, I didn't know what to expect when I read it, but if had I tried, I would have not been able to guess. And as you say in the book, you are the furthest thing from a motivational coach. What made you want to write this book?
You know what? I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the best winners out there. And after the years and years of seeing everything that's out there, especially this last year and a half with everything that's been going on in the world, people have forgotten what a win looks like. They've forgotten what it feels like. And all the language that's put out there about winning makes it seem like it's so easy. And it's not. It's this extremely difficult thing that many of us go through on a daily basis, but the reward and the joy at the end is undescribable. And I wanted to talk more about the path and the road that we take just to get to those moments of joy and take out all the BS, take out all the sugarcoating, take out all the sprinkles, take out all the feel-good stuff and say, hey, this is what it's about. That's it.
I think for many people, the book will be validating, but it's also humbling, of course, because you're working with the top athletes in the world, and it can also be unnerving. So what does it mean to win? What does winning mean to you?
Well, you know what? There's wins everywhere. It's winning to me is being able to put myself in a position where I can excel and myself and others benefit from what I've done. It's just not about me. It's about being able to pass on these winning lessons, these winning feelings to other individuals so they can know what it feels like to win. They can see what it takes to win. So it's about passing this information on and passing these wins on, not just for yourself, but for everybody that you can touch, every person that you can reach and say, hey, listen, winning is everywhere. It's every minute. We all have the opportunity to win, but these are the things you have to do to get there.
So I want to meditate a little bit on this because we're not going to be able to get to all the questions I have in this rundown, but I feel like this is the one place where I really want to focus. Because you don't actually give a definition for winning in the book. You get near it, you touch it a little bit, you move back. It feels like this omnipotent force that's kind of there always, but you can never really see it. It's fleeting. You reach out to touch it, it's gone. And there's so many places in the book where you talk about it poetically. You say that you reach out to shake its hand. It has no idea who you are. But you use 10 words in the book to describe winning, the 10th of which, everything, was apparently Kobe's definition of winning. And this is what your athletes have said, or these peak performers. They've called it uncivilized, hard, nasty, unpolished, dirty, rough, unforgiving, unapologetic, uninhibited, everything. I noticed that 5 of those words, half of them, began with the prefix un. And I wonder, is that because it's so difficult to really capture what winning is, and so you can only define it by what it isn't? And when we talk about it being uncivilized, unpolished, it feels like it's something that's very raw and elemental and very basic and foundational to who we are as animals.
100%. Demetri, you couldn't have described it any better. And that's what people want to look, as I said earlier, as winning as, the confetti and all that other stuff. And that's not what it's about. It's not about the glory. It's not about the payday. Winning is about the obstacles and challenges and pain you go through to get there. That's what it's about. And those obstacles and pains are unpolished, they're unforgiving, they're unapologetic, they're uninhibited, just like you said. You reach out to shake winning's hand and it doesn't know who you are. And it's not going to apologize for it. It's not going to apologize. It's going to say, who are you? Are you even invited to this party? Did you actually win? And then if you show up in this clean suit or this beautiful shirt, it's going to tell you, hey, rip those sleeves off because it's going to go time to get back to work. It's not fair. It is not fair. And it's not supposed to be fair. In the book, I talk about, listen, you could have worked out harder than someone else and they get the raise. They get the job. They get notarized. You can go ahead and do everything possible and that win still isn't guaranteed.
Right.
So it is going to be uncivilized. It is going to be hard. It is going to be nasty. But the reward at the end is so glorious. It's a feeling we can't describe. It's like Kobe said, it's everything. That's why we continue to be in this race to win over and over again. And even in another title, I didn't say the race. I said the unforgiving.
Mm. So you mentioned entitlement just now. And that's something, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it's something I did want to talk to you about. How detrimental is entitlement? The idea that you're owed something, even if you feel that you're owed it because you put in the work that you thought you were supposed to put in to get a particular outcome. How detrimental is entitlement to success, the type of success that you and your clients are after?
You know what? You're supposed to put in the work. That's what you said. Oh, I put in this week. Those are requirements. Those are requirements. You don't get rewarded for doing the required things. All right. You get rewarded for going beyond the required things and doing those things over and over and over again for years and years and years. And then if you do get to acknowledge winning and winning does get to acknowledge you, that's just the beginning of your climb. That's just the beginning of your climb. And people say, man, I work so hard and I'm not getting anywhere. Hard work does not guarantee success. Doesn't guarantee success. I hear when people always say, man, I'm busy. Everyone's busy. You're supposed to be busy. Oh, I hear that all the time. Man, I'm so busy. You're supposed to be busy. It's like people want to get affirmation and for things you're supposed to do. Later on in the book, I talk about, how they say, showing up is half the battle. No, showing up is none of the battle. It's none of the battle. But people want to get rewarded for doing the things that they're supposed to do. Winning is like, okay, these are all the things that you're supposed to do. You're not going to get acknowledged just for showing up. You're not going to get acknowledged for just working hard. And most people look at from other individuals. I don't look for validation. Winning doesn't look for validation from other individuals. It wants validation from you. It wants validation from you.
So let's talk about that a bit more. And I do want to actually go back and drill deeper into this particular thing, because although you work with athletes to help them achieve very ambitious goals, there is no roadmap to victory, right? Winning is not formulaic. No. And I'd love to talk about that more, but I want to go back to working on really trying to clarify a bit better this definition of winning, because I think it is, while reading this, again, I feel like people do need to read your book, because we can't do it justice in trying to capture it here, because, again, it is so fleeting, winning and your definition of it. But I felt reading it, and this I think is also important for people listening, because what comes across in your book is that this doesn't apply just to people that have won or competed in athletic performance. There are all sorts of ways of thinking about this. And one of the ways that I thought about it when I was reading the book was that winning is about having this idea in your head, having this insane ambition, this dream, and then manifesting it, making it real. And all the work and sacrifice and self-doubt and uncertainty, everything that goes in between A and B. And the uncertainty, of course, being that you may not ever get there, to the point about there is no guarantee. So
no guarantee.
How much of it is that? Is this willing into the world something you want, taking it for yourself, not having someone else give it to you?
You have to take it. You have to take it. Winning belongs to them, and you have to take it. Winning belongs to somebody else. Everything that you want, everything that you're trying to achieve, somebody else has it. Somebody else has it. They may have the number one podcast, the number one TV show, the number one sales position, whatever it is. You got to compete. You have to go compete, and you have to go get it. You have to go out there, and you have to put everything that you have. But here's a key on this one. You got to have talent in what you're doing. I'll get emails from individuals that say like, I'm 32 years old. I haven't played soccer in the last 10 years. I'm going to be the greatest soccer player. You're not. Winning needs to know the truth. And in that aspect, it's not going to happen. Now, you want to have some other dreams about winning that's related in the soccer field. We can talk about those. Those are the things that you're to pursue. But you have to compete. Winning always belongs to somebody else. It does. And everybody looks, and this upsets me so much, is everybody looks for the easiest way. That's why they buy all the books that say 5 easy steps, 10 great ways. Or you get this question, I get this question all the time. What's the one thing? There is no one thing. Just like there are no steps. Those steps are infinite, and they're constantly shifting. They're constantly moving. They're constantly disappearing. And you got to trust yourself that, hey, those next steps are there by putting in the work that nobody else sees, that nobody else notices, that nobody else really cares about. Nobody else really cares about. Are you looking for validation from somebody else? I always say, okay, there's 2 types of people. There's people that are actually clapping for you, and there's people that are clapping because they have to. All right, most of the people that you're looking for validation, they're clapping because they have to, not for you.
All right, so that raises a bunch of other questions that I'm going to have to ask you. I scribbled them down. But before I do, let's go back, because I want to tie off this thing about winning not being formulaic. Is winning not formulaic because of the competitive nature of it? The fact that someone else always wants to take it from you? And so there cannot be some protocol to victory, because other people out there are constantly thinking about how to change their approach in order to take it from you. You're fighting over something that's very valuable, not just to you subjectively, but to other people as well.
Yes. And, again, we talk about this in the book. Winning makes you different, and different scares people. And people are afraid to be different. All right. Listen, how many times have you heard this? I was like, man, I'm afraid to become that person. You should be more afraid not to become that person.
Let's
All
talk
right,
about that.
That's what you should be fearful of. There's so much knowledge out there. There's so much information out there. All right. And what happens is we get in this brain trust where it's all about what to think. And that's why people want to follow the steps, because the steps tell them what to think. And all the social media gurus out there tell you what to think. All right. And there's a sense of control over what to think. Winning needs you to be different, and it needs you to do this. Not only does it need you to what to think, it needs you to learn how to think, because how to think is going to allow to use all of your mind, all of your talents, all of your mindset, all of your strengths, all of your weaknesses. You have to know how to think. Think of everybody that's done something exceptional. All right. Their ideas and thoughts were like, you know what? Nobody's ever done this before. No one's ever thought about this. Wasn't in a book. So I did it. That was the ability of how to think. Everyone knows how to compete. What to think teaches you how to compete. All right. How to think teaches you how to win.
I'm curious because, again, so many of your life experience at the height of your field, actually not even your field, you kind of invented it in a way, right? I mean, there weren't people doing this when you got into the business.
No.
These athletes were being trained by their organizations. My question is, when you look at the educational system in society, do you feel that it's in some ways imparting the wrong lessons? It's teaching people what to think. It's giving people a set of problems and a solution set that goes with those problems, rather than teaching them a modality or an approach to problem solving that allows them to approach new problems, probably they've never seen before, in ways that are new. I mean, is that sort of thinking in real time? It feels like that's what you were doing when you were training these athletes, people like Michael or Kobe. You were looking at every single game, what was happening in real time, and making decisions that were specific to that athlete at that time. And you had to be able to innovate on the fly.
Yeah, and people don't have that ability because they're so afraid of being wrong. They're so afraid of making a mistake. They're so afraid about being judged, about doing something different that nobody else is doing. They want to stand out, but everything they do is what keeps them in the middle of the pack. You know, when I was training MJ, nobody told me, there was not a book. And I went to school for 6 years for this stuff. I mean, I like Lily, I learned this thing inside and out. There wasn't one lesson that told me, hey, that an athlete should actually train and lift on game day. Like, and everybody told me, you got to be crazy. You're going to actually have this individual, you're going to have Michael Jordan training on game day. He's going to be too tired. He's going to be too stiff. His shot's going to be thrown off. And I sat down, I said, working out makes an individual less athletic. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And then I looked at the schedule. I looked at all the different things. No one had done that before. And that was my thing of how to think. And that's the way we figured out our ways to win. That was my way to win, to say, hey, let's go out of the system of everything that I learned in school, which was extremely beneficial. It was extremely beneficial. You know what is this thing to say? Listen, when you go to school, you learn and then you take the tests. But in life, you take the test and then you learn.
Interesting.
Well, so I think there has to be adaptability of both of those things, where you have to have, hey, yeah, these are your foundation principles. When I worked with my athletes, you know, there were foundational principles that I learned through school that all my athletes did. Here, this is the core basis of the training. Then from there, I started to add my own stuff into it.
So is that a way of talking about how there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path? And in order to walk the path, how important is it, Tim, to have a deep sense of confidence in yourself, and also to know why you're doing what you're doing, to understand why, not to just be doing it, but to actually be in alignment? How important is that in order to make it?
It's so important. Listen, confidence is the ultimate drug. It's the ultimate drug. All right. It is. And winning is the dealer. I always say this, and winning is the dealer. The more you win, or the more you get in that race, that unforgiving race to winning, whether you win and you're going to lose during that race, you're going to lose, you're going to fail, you're going to fall a lot of times. But Every time you win, every time you lose, every time you get in that path, every time you get in that race, you're going to end up more confident. Because if you're going to go after it, what is confidence? You got to bet on yourself. That's what confidence is, betting on yourself. And when you bet on yourself, most of the times you are going to fail, you are going to lose.
Why does that scare people? Is that where most people get stuck?
Yeah, because they'd rather bet on somebody else's outcome. It's easier.
Why? Because they want to have somebody to blame in case they fail?
What they want to do is they don't want to make decisions. They want somebody to have them suggestions. They always want an out. People always want an out. All right. And winning does not give you an out. It doesn't want you to try your best. It wants you to do your best. And there's a big difference between the two. When you say, hey, I tried my best, that means you gave yourself an out. Did you do your best? Mm-hmm. If you did your best, that gives you the confidence. And every time you fall, you can't stand up the same way. You cannot stand up the same way. If you fall and you stand right back up, you're going to get knocked down again. You fall and you fail. You need to stay down there for a bit. You need to find out why in the hell this happened to you. And then when you stand up, you're going to stand up more confident. You're going to get knocked down and fall again. When you're going to stand up again, you're going to stand up stronger, which is going to make you more confident. You're going to fall down and fail again. You're going to stand up. You're going to make you more smarter and confident. You fall down, stand up again, you're going to have more resiliency. So if you can stand up stronger, smarter, and more resilient, that's going to lead to confidence. But you got to gamble on yourself. You got to gamble on yourself. Get rid of that safety net.
Yeah. So in the book, the way you describe the path to winning, it's pretty brutal. And while that resonates and I can relate to that, and maybe this is just me remembering or sort of nostalgizing periods of my life where I really was in the zone. But it does feel like that's compensated for by the alignment that you feel. You know, like when you talk about like falling down, it's one thing falling down when you're on someone else's journey. But when you're on your own journey, when you know where you are and why you're doing something, how do you describe that feeling even when you're going through hell, right? You talk about this. You haven't reached the promised land. You're in hell. But is there something comforting? Is there something that makes even that itself preferable to basically deciding I'm not going to play in this game because I'm too afraid?
You know what? It's the ability to laugh at yourself. You're the only one that ever asked that question. It's the ability to laugh at yourself. Because if you can laugh at yourself and know, hey, listen, I messed up. All right, I failed. Why did I fail? Let me figure this out. Then you don't worry about when anybody else is laughing at you and what those people are thinking about you. With each step you take, this path is extremely difficult. It is extremely hard. It is going to be unforgiving. But you have to find the joy in those things. You have to find those little wins. And that's what those individuals do. The individuals that win over and over and over again in business, in sports, whatever it is, whatever activity that the people I'm dealing with, they always find joy in their wins, their losses. You know, it may not be euphoric joys, but they're like, okay, you know what? That wasn't too bad. All right. I fell down. I was down here. I got stuck in this mud, and they make it a part of what elevates them, what keeps them going, what allows them to push beyond everybody else. And they're not looking to point fingers. They're not looking to point fingers at anybody else because they fell down. They rather fall down than have somebody else push them down.
Right. So here, to tie this back into the point about there being no path, winning is not formulaic. Because there is no path, does this also explain why winning is so emotional? Because the ultimate outcome of victory is self-transformation, it's self-discovery, and actually the process of doing that is so powerful for that sort of maturation and growth. You know, that you feel when you're actually in it.
Yeah. It's the release at the end. That's what all the emotions are. It's like, man, I put all this time, I put all this effort. I alienated a lot of people, and you're going to alienate a lot of people in this race. All right. And then I had a few people that stood with me. And that's what all the emotion is. It's just like winning's allowing you to celebrate briefly.
Yeah.
Very, very briefly. Because if you celebrate too long, it's not going to allow you to stand on that stage again. Because as soon as you win, winning requires you to change. Winning's already changing the combination to the win that you just had. It's already throwing it out. It's changing the combination. It's changing the key. It's making things more difficult for you to continue to win.
Is it important to celebrate? Do you need to be able to acknowledge a victory?
People acknowledge it in different ways. All right. You have individuals that acknowledge it in a big public forum, and you have other individuals, and I have many CEOs that do this. They literally acknowledge it in isolation with themselves. You know, you'll see them that they'll have this massive corner office with an unbelievable view, and they get the news of whatever they were trying to accomplish, whatever they were trying to accomplish for the company. And they'll either they'll have a glass of their favorite drink, and they'll just look outside and be like, that's how they celebrate. They look at the sky and see, I got here. Now what's next? Now what's next? So every celebration, it's like, you know, you have an individual that cries at a wedding, which means they're happy. And then you have individuals that cry that in another event, which can be sad. So individual who's crying, if they're crying, it's known to be sad, but for individuals that winning, crying is actually happy. And for other individuals that just being silent and just enjoying what's internally very special to them is no different than the other individuals that's jumping around and cheering and high-fiving everyone.
So I've listened to a number of interviews that you've done. By the way, I tend to think that my interviews are better than most people's, and I pride myself on having people come on this podcast and having the best experience. But man, have you done some phenomenal interviews with Jordan Harbinger, also with, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but I mean, some incredible interviews where you've had very different conversations. And I highly suggest, I don't normally do this, but I strongly suggest to listeners that if they hear this and they want more, they should check out a bunch of those other podcasts, because you talk about so many different things. And we didn't start with your own life story, but that's maybe perhaps because I've heard it on a number of other podcasts. But it is, in some ways, as interesting as that of your athletes. Because, I mean, just your story about how you got started. You got started with Michael Jordan. So, you know, tell me and our listeners, for people that aren't familiar with Tim Grover and how he got his start, what drew you to working with athletes in the first place? And then what got you to basically the position of working as a strength coach for Michael Jordan for 15 years, and then eventually training people like Kobe Bryant, Dwyane Wade, and other super athletes?
So when I went to college, like any other freshman, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And both my parents are of Indian descent. So you have two options for a career choice. Number one's a doctor, and number one's a doctor. That's it. And I told my parents I did not want to go to medical school. They said, well, what do you want to do? I was studying kinesiology, which was a movement of the body and so forth. I was playing college basketball. I knew I don't have the ability to make money playing basketball, but I was like, you know what? I want to enjoy sports. How can I still be involved in sports? I don't want to coach. You know, I don't want to be a manager. I don't want to do these different things. I said, I want to make athletes better. I want to make them better. So when I told my parents, I said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to train professional athletes. And they were like, what does that even mean? Because it really didn't exist. As you said earlier, it's like the people that did that, it was through the organization. I said, no, I said, there's something missing here. There's a business here. I've seen how we're trained as collegiate athletes. I've seen other sports. And I said,
you just knew. You were just confident.
I just knew. So what I did was I literally graduated, and, you know, in our household, there was like, listen, either you go to school or you go to work, one of the two. So I took a job at a local health club with a master's degree in exercise science. And the minimum wage back in the 80s was $3.35. So I took the job. I took the job working in a health club, and I just started to work my way up to a trainer. Even though with my education, I still had to work my way up to a trainer. I started to get phenomenal results with individuals, no matter what they want, what they were training in, whether it was losing weight, recreational tennis, golf, basketball, whatever.
Were you
whatever
experimenting from the beginning?
From the beginning. Exactly. From the beginning. They gave you the programs. They were, here it is. I was like, this is a place to learn. This is a place to mess up. This is a place to figure things out. This is a place to do things that nobody else is doing. And then what I did was I was like, all right, how can I take this to the next level? There was a small article in the newspaper saying how Michael Jordan was tired of taking the physical abuse from the Detroit Pistons and he wanted to get stronger.
Sorry, so this was how far into your work as a trainer in this health?
Oh, my goodness. Oh, this was, at least 3-4 years.
Okay. So you were working with private clients, basically people that were just looking to improve.
They weren't private clients that belong,
but regular people.
Yes,
regular people.
Regular people.
That's wild.
So I said, you know what? And I was also the highest grossing trainer that place has ever had because I was literally booked solid all the way through. Then I said, you know what? Back then, remember, no emails. You couldn't text anybody. So I said, you know what? I'm going to write letters to each player on the Chicago Bulls organization. And then if I get a chance to work with them, then maybe I can work my way into something else. The only player I didn't write a letter to was Michael Jordan because I was like, all right, he's already on the top of his game. Why is he going to work out with an individual that never worked with a professional athlete, never done anything? So I sent 14 letters. There's 15 players on an NBA team. So Michael he saw the letter in somebody else's locker.
Do you still have a copy of that letter? You should have put that in the book.
If I really dug somewhere, I bet you I could. I do know one thing. All those letters were handwritten. They were handwritten. And then what I did was he gave that letter to the athletic trainer and the team physician at that time and say, hey, find out what this is about. And I got a call and they didn't tell me who it was. They said, hey, we have a player that's interested in hiring your services. So let's meet. So literally for 3 months, I went back and forth with the meeting with the team doctors and the medical staff and so forth so they could test me, evaluate me to see if I knew what I was doing. Then afterwards, they gave me an address. They said, here's the client. They still didn't tell me who this was. They still didn't tell me who it was. And they said, here's the address. Meet the client at 1:30. All right. So I drive out there. I ring the doorbell. This was before the big gated house and all that other stuff. Ring the doorbell once, ring the doorbell twice, ring it third time. I was like, man, no one's coming to the door. Third ring, Michael Jordan opens up the door.
What was that like since you weren't expecting him?
I'm not a starstruck person.
Right.
It didn't have, my parents raised me, that's never bothered me. So I just opened the door and said, okay, I don't have the plan for this individual, but I've seen him play so much throughout his career, even in college, because of who he was. I already know what to do. So he invited me in the house. We talked for about 40 minutes. And then he goes up to me. He goes, listen, I need to get bigger. I need to get stronger. I said, well, why do you want to get bigger and stronger? He goes, I want to get faster. I want to jump higher. I want to be able to, dish out contact instead of taking it. I said, well, if we address the injuries that happen on a regular basis with you, with the hamstrings, with the ankles, with the groin pulls, I said, let's address those things. I said, if we address those things, I said, your body is probably playing right now at about 80, maybe 85% optimum level. I said, imagine if everything was functioning at 100%. You would already be more athletic. You'd already be stronger. You'd already be jumping higher. You'd already be running faster. And he was like, well, how are we going to do those things? I said, we literally have to break your body into 4 separate sections. I said, and he goes, no one's explained it to me this way. I said, yeah. And I told him what I was going to do. He goes, this doesn't sound right. I said, it doesn't get any righter.
4 separate sections.
4 separate sections. So what I was doing was I was separating right down the center, left, right, upper, and lower.
What made you think of the routine like that?
Because when I watched him train, I always saw that he would, any athlete, you're going to go more to your dominant side. You're just going to go, that's how people, if you're right-handed, you're going to have a tendency to use your right hand more. You're going to push off more in that direction. So I was saying, we actually need to work that side less and we need to work the other side more. I said, I can tell right now, Mike, I've never seen you work out, but I said, when you work out, I said, do they hand you weights of equal weight in both hands? He goes, yes, they do. I said, that's totally wrong. I said, that's totally wrong. He goes, why is that totally wrong? I said, because one side is more fatigued than the other. One side is weaker than the other. So what you're doing is you're creating more of an imbalance all the time, all the time. All right. So I said, what we need to do is we need to break everything into a section, and we're going to focus in on this section, then this section. Each quadrant is going to have its own separate workout. It's not going to be an overall workout. Each quadrant is going to have its own separate workout. And then he was like, all right, he goes, this sounds really interesting. I said, give me 30 days. Give me 30 days to implement this. I said, I'm going to tell you how you're going to feel the next day, what's going to be sore, how to make adjustments in your game, why we're doing this particular exercise. I said, after 30 days, if this doesn't work out, I will walk away. I said, thank you very much. 30 days turned into 15 years.
Remarkable. Were you early on focusing on balance? I mean, that's become something that's, I think, more...
the stuff they're doing with athletes, I was doing 25 years ago. 25 years ago.
Amazing. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because this pops into my head now since we're talking about athletic routines. It sounds like most of the people that you've worked with in your career are part of teams or from team sports. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, of course, basketball, the individual players have a disproportionate effect on the outcome than on a sport like football or soccer, but it still isn't like an MMA or MMA fighter, boxer, tennis player. I'm curious to know what the difference is, because you don't actually, that's the other thing that's interesting in the book, you don't discuss camaraderie or the team dynamics. And I'm curious why you didn't talk about those. And I'm curious how the mindset of someone who's competing as part of a team is similar to or differs from that of someone who's completely alone in his or her sport.
Well, this is what I do. If I didn't talk about that in the book, but I did put Michael's quote in there from The Last Dance, where, he said, hey, individuals, he didn't say I had to push individuals. I had to pull individuals. I had to pull them to get them to raise their game, to raise their level, to understand what winning was about. And he goes, I never asked anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. All right. So what we always used to do is I always had my individuals that I've worked with, and I continue to do this. I said, I need you to set individual goals that benefit you, but that will also benefit the team victory. What are those things? So I kind of turned a team sport also into an individual fight. So, all right, what do we have to do? Is it scoring more points? Is it playing better defense? Is it getting 3 steals a game? Is it playing 82 games? What is it? What are the individual goals that you have to set for yourself to maximize your winning, so it will translate into the team's winning effect? Now, I do deal with quite a few MMA individuals. I do deal with quite a few individuals that do play individual sports such as golf and tennis. All right. They are still competing with another direct individual, but they're also competing with the environment.
Well, those are really interesting, 2 interesting sports to compare. You could actually take golf and tennis and lump them together, because in both of those sports, there are significant periods of time between thought and action, between seeing something, the ball's coming at you, and there's some period of time. Whereas MMA, it's immediate. I mean, it is, you're in it. So I'm curious to know, in your experience, the sorts of individuals that perform better in those sports. Is there a difference? I mean, are people who have much better control over their minds able to perform relatively better in a sport like golf? Is that less of an issue in something like MMA?
Yeah, it's to be able to, it's how fast you can create clarity and how fast you can go from one emotion to the other. And we actually teach that. So we work with athletes that, especially in individual sports athletes, when they get fatigued, we immediately give them a mental task, like a difficult mental task for them to accomplish while they're fatigued.
Give me an example of what you're talking about.
Well, I can't do that. I can't do that. But we give them something. So we're constantly creating chaos. We're constantly creating chaos to create clarity.
Fascinating. I had no idea that you did that. I've heard you talk about creating chaos, about throwing the ball in all sorts of different places and not letting anyone feel comfortable. I didn't know you tested people like that. So let's dig in a bit more about the role of the mind. One of the things I found interesting was when you compared Kobe to Michael, how they approached training. And you said Kobe was a harder worker, but Jordan worked smarter.
Yes.
Tell me about that in their cases. And then I'm curious to know, is it better ultimately to be a smarter worker than to work harder? And is someone who sort of works as hard as Kobe did, someone that you really need to push, he's going to sneak back in the gym at 3 a.m. You have to have an alarm system on to prevent it to come inside. Is that because there's a trust issue fundamentally where they don't trust themselves or the process and they feel like they just have to work it to death as opposed to getting to a certain point and putting down the shovel, stopping the workout, knowing that you've done the job?
That true. It's not trust. It's not fully trusting themselves. It's that having that battlefield in the mind that's constantly going, that's saying, hey, listen, what did I do wrong? What didn't I do well? I could have done this better. Was my foot position wrong? Michael had the ability when he knew he did something, something was incorrect, he was able to visualize it and see it and play it again in his head. He didn't actually have to go out on the court and do it again. Kobe actually had to go through the movement. It didn't have to be on the basketball court. It could have been in his hotel room. It could have been in his house. It could have been anywhere. But he had to actually go through the routine. He had to feel it. He had to see what was going on. Michael was just able to understand, okay, this is what I did. This is what I didn't do. And both of them their memories were unbelievable. They could remember details from way back when. I used to say Kobe was fluent, and I forget, it's like 4 or 5 different languages. I'm talking about like fluent, like really, really fluent. So from his brain pattern worked differently than Michael's. Michael was able to see something and be able to pick it up right away. Like he would be able to see it. He would have this thing, and the coaches, Phil, whatever it was, Phil, Doug Collins, Chuck Daly in the Olympics and all that other stuff. And, 10 minutes before the game starts, they put all this stuff up on the board. All right. And Michael would walk away and he would say, it's 10 minutes before the game. If I don't know it now, I'm not going to know it. And he would literally, okay, I got it.
He was a strong visual learner.
Like this. He did a lot of visual stuff repetitive over and over and over and over and over and over again. Like he would watch the same frame over. Kobe had to watch the whole game. Michael would watch just little pieces of different frames and said, I got it. I got it. And then remember, Kobe was always chasing the ghost, which was Michael.
Yeah.
All right. So he was chasing that myth. So in order for him to compete and try to pass that myth, his mindset was, I have to continue to work. I got to work harder. I got to work harder. I got to work harder.
So interesting. I've heard you say that Kobe needed things that Michael could trust. If he just made a decision on you, he was willing to basically take what you told him and just accept it and implement it. But with Kobe, he needed it explained to him. He needed to understand it. Yeah. I find that also very interesting. I relate with that modality, that second one.
Well, with MJ, it was just like, hey, he goes, one of my favorite lines that he said about me is when somebody else would want to hire me, he's going like, hey, he goes, listen, I don't pay him to train me. I pay him not to train anybody else. Oh, so Michael trusted me. He was very in tune. If something didn't feel right, he would question it. He didn't just go about it blindly, but he was like, I hired you to do this part of my performance. All right. If you do this to the highest level, then I can stay focused on the other things that I need to focus in on, which was the basketball skill component. I can focus in on that. Kobe, on the other hand, I think how this happened with him and I was when I started working with him in 2007, one of the reporters had asked him and said, hey, you hired Michael Jordan's guy, Tim Grover. What do you think about him? And Kobe's like, I don't know. He ain't done nothing for me. He used a different adjective than that word.
I've heard you say this story too.
Yeah. He goes, asked me at the end of the season. So he wanted to make sure that I just wasn't doing the same thing that I did for Michael, because he was a completely different player, different body type, different makeup. So he was just like, so he wanted to make sure that, hey, what did Michael do and why am I doing this? Why am I not doing the same thing that he did? Well, this is why, this is what's going on here. And so he was constantly questioning, constantly learning, constantly educating himself to make sure what I was doing was to make him the best Kobe Bryant and not to make him a copycat of Michael.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and those guys they're relentless in not only holding themselves accountable, but holding other people in their orbit accountable.
Brutally.
Brutally. Results oriented.
Yes. It was just like, so one of the first things that MJ told me was, you better keep up.
But you must have loved that. I mean, like.
I do. Here's the thing. The reason those guys hired me is because I'm just as crazy as they are. I'm just as obsessed. I'm just, winning is as important. I pay attention to all the details that nobody else pays attention to. I used to literally travel. When we would travel on the, I knew how important golfing was to MJ, and he wasn't allowed to take his golf clubs on the team plane. So when I traveled and I wasn't part of the organizations, I literally would travel with his golf clubs, with my luggage, because I knew how important for him to have those things, whether it was just to swing them in the hotel room, it was creating clarity. Everybody thought golf was a detriment to him. It was creating stress. And to me, no, it was actually creating clarity for him. It was allowing him to get away from all the chaos. It was allowing him his body to do a different movement pattern than what he was doing over and over again, which creates so much overuse now with the young athletes.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We did this other episode some time ago where we discussed when we compared the Tiger Woods model to the, I think, Roger Federer model. And apparently, if I remember correctly, if it was in fact Roger, and I think it was, he didn't get into tennis until much later in his career. He played a lot of other sports.
Yeah.
And that spoke to both sampling, which is this idea of trying out to find exactly what fits. Because if you're really trying to fit into someone else's shoes, you're never going to be successful.
No.
And then the other is simply that there are benefits to sampling all these different sports and having this sort of eclectic background in solving novel problems.
Yes. Kobe was a huge soccer player. Loved soccer. Absolutely loved it. We spent numerous times just for, part of his training, just kicking a soccer ball around. And because in his mind, he was like, playing soccer relates to better footwork out on the basketball court. So instead of constantly practicing the basketball move all there, he loved to kick a soccer ball around. Every time we would travel overseas, he would visit all the different high-end soccer clubs or football clubs over there. And, he'd go out there and kick it around with the players, and he'd want to go see the best of the best do their craft and kind of watch and learn from them and ask different questions. And it's just what you said, it's sampling from all these other individuals that aren't even in their sport. Most of the time, people only sample the physical or the mental. He was sampling both. And it's this thing, what I said earlier, everybody says, well, how did they do it? Don't worry about how they did it. All right, worry about how you're going to do it.
Well, that goes back to believing in yourself and having confidence in yourself. But
yes.
even if you have confidence in yourself, I mean, so someone like you, your results, look, your athletes aren't curing brain cancer.
No, they're not.
But their careers and people's dreams and hopes and all sorts of things hinge on these people's careers and the outcomes of these games. And of course, they're doing something absolutely incredible. So you must have felt not just some sense of responsibility, an overwhelming sense of responsibility, but you probably also, weren't there moments in your career working with athletes where either you couldn't get something quite right or you were possibly worried that you would do something wrong and you would adversely impact them? In other words, you were confident, but could you have been worried at all given the stakes?
Every single time they missed a shot or an athlete got hurt or something happened, I would take it on myself. Did I do the wrong exercise? Did I count the reps wrong? Should I, instead of doing this exercise on a Tuesday, should have waited until a Friday? That fear does not go away. But I never had doubt in the end result. There's a huge difference between fear and doubt. Anytime my athlete stepped out in practice or anytime he stepped in on a game, yeah, I had some fear that, all right, okay, there's going to be a career ending. There could be an injury or something could be going wrong. But I didn't have any doubt in my mind that I did everything possible to minimize those things. Because what my athletes wanted to do was, listen, with them, fear allowed them to play to win. Because fear fueled them. It heightened their senses. It heightened their alerts. Just like I say, you're standing next to somebody, just scare them. And all of a sudden, you see how alert all of a sudden those individuals are. So you need fear. You need fear. Doubt is playing not to lose.
I've heard George St. Pierre talk about this. Now, he wasn't afraid of getting his ass kicked. He was afraid of losing. That was such a huge motivator for him. He talked about it on a podcast with Joe Rogan, which I just found so fascinating. Can you tell when you meet somebody if they have what it takes, or at the very least, if they don't have what it takes? You may not know exactly if they have what it takes, but you know for sure if they're not going to make it.
Yeah, anybody that gives you all the right answers, they don't have it. They don't have it.
Because they're contrived, they're putting on a show, because they're not being 100% honest.
They're not. Forget about being truthful with me. You're not being truthful with yourself. Because here's the thing. If you were that confident and you were like, hey, I have all those things, you wouldn't be telling me what you have. You'd be telling me what you don't have. That's what I need to know. It's like, what don't you have? What is missing? What is missing? And then why is it missing? That's what I need to know.
So you talk about this too, that all of these guys and gals, if you've worked with female athletes, are coachable. They're incredibly coachable. They take criticism and they're able to adapt and evolve and change and make those necessary changes. I guess I want to ask you about that. And I also wonder, how important is confidence in being coachable? Because taking on criticism in a constructive way requires that you be confident, no?
It's so important. Listen, everybody wants confidence. I said this earlier. Everybody wants to gain confidence from somebody else. They want those persons to believe in you. Why
they want validation.
Why should somebody else believe in you if you don't believe in yourself? That's the whole point. It says, they don't believe in my dreams. They're your dreams. What the hell they should believe in your dreams for? It's for you to believe in your dreams. They got their own dreams that they're chasing. All right. But the confident individuals, they are the most coachable individuals, the higher end athletes, the best CEOs. They're all, because they're so good and so talented that they're looking for that, not that 1% edge. They're looking for that 0.0001%. I remember I did a speech and Michael Phelps was also speaking at the same event. And I sat there and spoke to him. And he says he's in the pool when he was training on a regular basis to cut 0.0001 second off his time. That's what he's got to do. That's talk about confidence and talk about believing in your coach to say, hey, listen, this is what we have to do because I need you to get not 1% better. I need you to get 0.00 because you're already so good.
Man, I found, like I said, I love your book. It's so great. One of the things that the experience that I got out of reading the book was some amount of validation. And what do I mean? Specifically, I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like this is probably true for a lot of folks that fall in this category. Our obsession with details and with that sort of, I hesitate to call it perfection because so often when you say perfection is such a dirty word, you can never achieve perfection, but the pursuit of perfection can oftentimes come across to people as unhealthy. And this also, I guess, raises the point about balance. I mean, how important are details? And how do you reconcile this with this larger kind of consensus view in society that you need to achieve balance or that you can have balance? You can be successful and have balance in your life.
Well, the details are so important. All right. I always say, they don't sweat the small stuff. No, I say sweat everything. Sweat everything. I'll give you a great example. All right. I've done, I don't know how many different podcasts. You're the first one that's actually done it in a soundproof room.
For real?
Yeah.
Well, we have very high quality standards on audio for this podcast. So.
You are sitting in, I'm like, this is in how many years I've done this? Other people have had setups.
Yeah.
they put a little thing here, they put a little shield or whatever it is.
Yeah. No,
So
I'm obsessive with this stuff.
All right. What a big thing Kobe says, why was he so successful, not only in basketball, but after basketball? Because he was obsessed. He was obsessed with the details. These guys are obsessed with the gym shoes. They were obsessed with what they wore. They're obsessed with what they drove. I was so obsessed that when I used to see, obviously sprained ankles is a big thing in basketball. So there's different ways to tape an ankle depending on where the sprain is. So I was like, all right, well, let's take it even farther. If there's different ways to tape an ankle, shouldn't there be different ways to lace a shoe?
Interesting.
So you would literally, there were not many games, but there were a few games that literally my athletes, their shoelaces on the right and left foot were laced differently. They were laced differently because the injury that they were dealing with. Those are the details.
That's so interesting. That speaks to your workout regimen for Michael. I mean, nothing was templated for you. Let's to this point about balance. And since you did work in the NBA, and you maybe even remember this. I mean, it's not like I don't know why this. Actually, I kind of do, but I still don't know why this is in my head. I remember when Isaiah Thomas took a job working for NBC as an honorary analyst. Before he began working for NBC, they had just announced it. I believe it was either the playoffs or it was towards the end of the 98 season, and the Utah Jazz were either number 1 or number 2 winning record in the NBA. And Karl Malone, of course, these guys hadn't won a championship, Stockton and Malone, right? Like everybody else who was playing Jordan's era. And one of the anchors at ESPN, or NBC rather, interviewed Karl Malone, and he said something along the lines of, Isaiah Thomas is going to be coming on and joining the NBC family. And Isaiah says that if you want to be a champion, if you want to win a championship, you've got to be obsessed. It has to be your number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, everything. You've got 13 priority. And Karl Malone got pissed. I remember he got pissed off. And the first thing he brought up was his family. And he basically said something along the lines of, Isaiah Thomas isn't going to tell me that my family isn't a bigger priority than winning an NBA championship. And so my question to you is Isaiah Thomas correct? And what does that mean, so to speak? Is he correct? And what does that mean practically for the lives of people who live their lives in this particular way, who seek sort of excellence and the equivalent of winning in whatever their particular domain is? What does it mean for family? What does it mean for personal health? What does it mean for all these other things that are important? And how does one decide whether he or she is actually winning in life if they may be crushing it in their career and their career is their vocation, but they're dealing with a divorce, or their kids don't want to see them or talk to them because they feel like they haven't had a relationship with them? How do you know if you're living your best life, if you are living a good life?
You have to determine what your definition of winning is, what we just said earlier. Listen, I'm sure you've had people that been on your show and they love to always talk about balance, how much you need balance, how important balance is. Let me tell you, I'm going to make it very, very simple. All right. There is no balance. You don't find balance. You create it, and it's different for each individual out there. All right. Now, Isaiah's got 2 championships, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Karl Malone's got how many?
0.
0. All right. He's got 0. Now, if Isaiah chose his balance, he created that balance, and Karl chose his balance over here. All right. Now, would it have been different if Karl would have put something, I don't know, going up against that myth known as MJ? It would have been extremely, extremely difficult. But something has to give. Something always has to give. Time for everything equals time for nothing. Balance is personal. It is personal. And how do you get closer to balance? It's funny when people say you need to have more balance, they usually are the ones that have already been successful in whatever their endeavor is. And now they don't want to talk about the times that they took to create this balance and how imbalanced their lives were. And when we tell individuals we need more balance, what do? We try to add more stuff. We constantly add stuff.
Love that.
So now you're juggling more and more stuff. All right. Now you're trying to balance even more stuff. What do you do to create more balance? It's not about the addition. It's about the subtraction. It's about getting rid of the whatever you feel is the unessential for you to get whatever your win is in that particular time. And listen, there are times where the family does suffer, the friends do suffer. And listen, I said it in a book. I wrote this in a book with my daughter and having her to tell me.
Powerful.
I did it. But to me, it was important for me during that time, not only for myself, but to set a standard for her saying, hey, this is why I did these things. You got to understand what works for you and not what works for anybody else. You don't find anybody else's balance. You find what your balance is, and how do you get closer to it? It's what somebody else thinks is so essential in their life, you may have to delete that part in order to get your win. And what you think is your win, somebody else will be like, nah, I'm not, that's not that important to me.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the point about knowing what you want. We won't have a chance to talk about the IDGAF muscle, but that's obviously something you flex. Last question, Tim, because I know we're running over, and I've tried to make.
I know you have, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I want to talk about time. That's the last question I have to ask you, because I think your reflections on that in the book are spot on. And you have this really great way of describing it. I'm not going to get it quite right, but you say life is not a marathon, it's a sprint with no end or something like that. It's
just no finish line.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Just one of many just great quips in the book.
You don't have the luxury of time. You don't. You just don't. And what I do with my athletes, I don't try. This is extremely important. Everybody out there teaches you. And this is why people don't win. All right, this is one of the reasons, because you're following what everybody else tells you. Everyone else is trying to motivate you and say, hey, these are the things that you need to do. And you go to all these seminars, you go to these things, you read all this stuff, and you end up being in the same place because you're hearing the same message over and over again because it's comfortable to you. It's comfortable to you. All right, you need to stop managing time. Everybody, you need to stop managing time. You need to start managing focus. You need to start managing focus. Time creates distractions. Focus blocks them out. That's as simple as I can get it. All right. Time tells you to stop. Focus tells you there's more to do. All right. Time is external. Focus comes from within. When somebody tells you, hey, focus, it's not like they give you a spoonful of focus, or they give you a pill that, they just tell you, hey, focus is internal. Focus is internal. So everyone out there, stop managing time. Because when you manage time, you're going to get a bunch of stuff that's average. Start managing focus, and you'll see how much more time you actually have. Now, one of the things I always said, and this is a tough story for me to tell, is I used to tell Kobe all the time, we don't have time. We don't have time. We don't have time. Because an athlete has a window in order to achieve as much as they possibly can. And I used to tell him that all the time. And to this very day, I wish I was wrong. I wish I was wrong, but we don't.
I'm sorry you lost your friend, Tim. It was, even for someone like me, I mean, I obviously didn't know Kobe Bryant. And to be honest, I kind of lost touch with the NBA. I was a Knicks fan. I kind of lost touch after the early 2000s. So I missed that second half of Kobe's career. But when I heard about it, I mean, he's one of those people that there's certain people who, when you lose them, it affects everybody, kind of like the Robin Williams. Same thing.
Great example. Yeah. Great example.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for writing this book. It's such an easy book to read, and it's not a big book. I highly recommend it to people, and it's so unique. You're not going to really find anything like it. So
we did that on purpose. We didn't want it to make it a tough read. We wanted to but the thing what I tell is people, the reason we did it that way, because I want people to read it multiple times throughout the year. That's why we didn't write this big old thing. So we want you, the key to this book, one of the main keys to this combination to winning is you need to read this book multiple times. I recommend at least 3 times a year until you okay, I get this, I get this, I get this.
Okay, I got a question before you go. First of all, I read it, and I listened to it, and I got to say, I love how you guys did the audiobook. Having you in there, I really love it. And that actually gets to something else. So you said read it, audiobook. You repeat things a lot. Now, I don't know if people have told you this. Is this by design? Have you found that over your life that you were able to get things into people's heads by saying it over again? I mean,
over and over and over again. That's how, listen.
I have your voice running in my head this week because I've heard so many podcasts, listen to the audiobook.
Listen, everybody, to the greatest individuals, to the greatest athletes, to the greatest CEOs, to the greatest winners, thinking is a distraction. It's a distraction. But you have to have years and years of thinking not to be able to think. If my athletes are thinking, they're not in the moment. So how do you turn a reaction into a reflex? You do it over and over and over and over again. That's why I repeat the same things over and over and over and over again until I know they no longer have to think about it. It's already embedded in their head. And that's just a repetition. That's how the guy, Kobe got his shots. Michael, you just do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Then you don't have to think about it.
Oh, Tim, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Again, everyone should go out and get your book, read it. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's episode of Hidden Forces was recorded in New York City. For more information about this week's episode, or if you want easy access to related programming, visit our website at hiddenforces.io and subscribe to our free email list. If you want access to overtime segments, episode transcripts, and show rundowns full of links and detailed information related to each and every episode, check out our premium subscription, available through the Hidden Forces website or through our Patreon page at patreon.com/Hidden Forces. Today's episode was produced by me and edited by Stylianos Nicolaou. For more episodes, you can check out our website at hiddenforces.io. Join the conversation at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Forces Pod, or send me an email at dk@hiddenforces.io. As always, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.